December 27th, 1942, Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. Through the scratched plexiglass of his cockpit, Second Lieutenant Richard Bong spotted them first, a formation of Japanese fighters cutting through the morning sky like sharks through water. The 22-year-old farm boy from Wisconsin had been flying combat missions for exactly 2 months without a single kill. Today, that would change in ways that would reshape the entire Pacific Air War. Bong pushed the throttles forward on his twin-engined Lockheed P-38 Lightning, feeling the massive Allison V-1710 engines surge with power. Below him, 40 Japanese fighters filled the sky over Dobodura, outnumbering the American formation nearly 2-to-1. The veteran Japanese pilots, accustomed to dominating the skies in their nimble Mitsubishi A6M Zeros and Nakajima Ki 43 Oscars, had dismissed the strange twin-boomed American fighters when they first appeared weeks earlier. The P-38s looked ungainly, almost comical with their distinctive fork-tail configuration. Japanese intelligence reports had classified them as heavy, clumsy machines, unsuited for the lightning-fast dogfights that characterized Pacific air combat. What happened in the next 10 minutes would shatter every assumption the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force and Imperial Japanese Navy had made about American fighter capabilities. Bong dove on a Zero from 15,000 feet, his P-38 accelerating past 400 miles per hour, a speed no Japanese fighter could match even in a vertical dive. The concentrated firepower of 4 50 caliber machine guns and one 20mm cannon, all mounted in the nose for pinpoint accuracy, tore the Zero apart in a 2-second burst. Before the wreckage hit the jungle canopy, Bong had already climbed back to altitude using the P-38's superior power-to-weight ratio at high speeds, and was lining up on an Oscar. By day's end, the 39th Fighter Squadron would claim 11 Japanese aircraft destroyed for the loss of a single P-38. The age of American air dominance in the Pacific had begun. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning emerged from one of the most audacious aircraft specifications ever issued by the United States Army Air Corps. In February 1937, the Air Corps released Circular Proposal X-608, demanding an interceptor capable of reaching 20,000 feet in 6 minutes and maintaining a top speed of at least 360 miles per hour at altitude. These requirements pushed beyond anything existing aircraft could achieve. Most fighter designs of the era struggled to exceed 300 miles per hour, and the altitude performance demanded seemed almost impossible with available technology. Clarence Kelly Johnson, a 27-year-old engineer at Lockheed Corporation, saw the challenge differently. Working under Hall Hibbard's direction, Johnson assembled what would later become famous as Lockheed Skunk Works, a secretive engineering team operating apart from the main factory. The team explored radical configurations, including push-pull propeller arrangements, on various twin-engine layouts. What emerged was unlike any fighter aircraft in the world: a central nacelle housing the pilot and armament, flanked by 2 engine booms each containing a turbo-supercharged Allison V-1710 engine, with twin vertical stabilizers and a connecting horizontal stabilizer, creating the distinctive forked tail. The XP-38 prototype first flew on January 27, 1939, with Lieutenant Benjamin S. Kelsey at the controls. Kelsey, who would become instrumental in the P-38 program, immediately recognized the aircraft's revolutionary potential. 2 weeks later, on February 11th, the prototype attempted a transcontinental speed record, flying from California to New York. The flight captured national attention, demonstrating speeds and performance that seemed to belong to the future rather than 1939. Though Kelsey was forced to crash land at Mitchell Field when the engines failed on approach, the point had been made. America possessed technology that could redefine air combat. The production P-38s that began reaching combat units in 1942 incorporated turbo superchargers that gave them unprecedented high-altitude performance. While Japanese fighters relied on mechanical superchargers that lost effectiveness above 20,000 feet, the P-38's turbo superchargers maintained sea-level engine performance well above 25,000 feet. This altitude advantage would prove decisive throughout the Pacific Campaign. The twin-engine configuration provided psychological comfort for pilots flying long missions over shark-infested waters. As General George Kenney, commander of the 5th Air Force, later explained, a pilot in a single-engine P-51 Mustang, watching sharks circle 400 miles from base, arrived at combat perhaps 50% effective, mentally calculating his odds if the engine failed. A P-38 pilot, knowing one of those big fans could bring him home, arrived at 100% effectiveness. The armament configuration revolutionized fighter gunnery. Previous fighters mounted guns in the wings, requiring pilots to calculate convergence angles and adjust for different ballistic paths. The P-38's nose-mounted battery of 4 M2 Browning .50 caliber machine guns and one Hispano 20mm cannon meant that wherever the pilot aimed, all weapons fired along the same axis. This concentration of firepower created a cone of destruction that could reliably hit targets at ranges up to 1,000 yards, far beyond what wing-mounted guns could achieve. The combined rate of fire exceeded 4,000 rounds per minute, with approximately every sixth projectile being a 20mm shell. Aircraft caught in this convergence pattern didn't just fall, they disintegrated. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, who survived the war with 64 confirmed victories, encountered P-38s over Guadalcanal in late 1942, and his assessment revealed the shock Japanese pilots experienced. In his post-war memoir, Sakai wrote with striking honesty about his first confrontation with the Lightning. "I was astonished to find an American aircraft that could outrun, outclimb, and outdive our Zero, which we thought was the most superior fighter plane in the world. The Lightning's great speed, its sensational high-altitude performance, and especially its ability to dive and climb much faster than the Zero presented insuperable problems for our flyers. The P-38 pilots, flying at great height, chose when and where they wanted to fight, with disastrous results for our own men. The P-38 boded ill for the future and destroyed the morale of the Zero fighter pilot." Sakai's assessment captured what Japanese pilots across the Pacific were discovering through bitter experience. The Zero's legendary maneuverability, which had terrorized Allied pilots in 1941 and early 1942, meant nothing when P-38s attacked from 30,000 feet, diving through Zero formations at speeds approaching 500 miles per hour, firing devastating bursts, then climbing back to altitude before the Zeros could react. The boom and zoom tactics that P-38 pilots developed turned every engagement into a one-sided massacre. Japanese pilots who attempted to follow P-38s upward found their aircraft wallowing in thin air, while the Lightnings continued climbing with full power. The psychological impact extended beyond tactical helplessness. Japanese pilots had entered the war supremely confident in their equipment and training. The Zero had dominated Chinese skies, massacred RAF Buffaloes over Malaya, and shot down countless P-40s and P-39s in the Philippines and New Guinea. Then came the P-38, an aircraft that seemed to violate everything Japanese doctrine taught about air combat. It was too big to be maneuverable, yet it maneuvered into killing positions with ease. It was too heavy to climb, yet it climbed faster than anything Japan could field. It was twin-engined and therefore supposedly vulnerable, yet damaged P-38s routinely returned home on one engine, while single-engine Zeros fell from minor hits to their unprotected fuel tanks. Richard Bong epitomized the transformation that P-38 pilots underwent as they mastered the aircraft. The Wisconsin farm boy had initially struggled with the Lightning's complexity. The aircraft required precise handling, with procedures that could kill an inattentive pilot. Transitioning from cruise to combat configuration involved a complex sequence. Switching from external fuel tanks to main tanks, adjusting mixture controls to auto-rich, increasing RPM, boosting manifold pressure, activating gun heaters, and enabling the combat switch. Reversing these steps or performing them out of sequence could cause engine failure at the worst possible moment. But Bong possessed an innate understanding of the P-38's strengths. He compensated for poor gunnery accuracy by closing to point-blank range, sometimes flying through the debris of exploding enemy aircraft. On one occasion, he collided with his target, then counted it as a probable kill since he couldn't confirm the destruction. Between December 1942 and December 1944, Bong would shoot down 40 Japanese aircraft, every single one, while flying P-38s. He became America's ace of aces, but more importantly, he demonstrated what properly employed Lightning tactics could achieve. The April 18, 1943 mission to intercept Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto showcased the P-38's unique capabilities in the most dramatic fashion possible. American codebreakers had intercepted messages detailing Yamamoto's inspection tour of bases in the Solomon Islands. The mastermind behind Pearl Harbor, commander of the combined fleet, and Japan's most competent naval strategist, would be flying from Rabaul to Bougainville in a pair of Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers, escorted by 6 Zero fighters. The intercept point lay 435 miles from Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, well beyond the range of Navy and Marine Corps F-4F Wildcats and F-4U Corsairs. Only the P-38, with its twin-engine endurance and long-range capability, could execute the mission. Major John Mitchell assembled 16 P-38Gs from the 339th Fighter Squadron, equipping each with 310-gallon drop tanks. The mission plan called for flying a circuitous route of over 600 miles, skimming wavetops to avoid Japanese radar, arriving precisely at 9:35 a.m. when Yamamoto's flight was scheduled to appear. Mitchell's navigation proved extraordinary. Flying for over 2 hours at 50 feet above the Pacific, using only a compass, watch, and dead reckoning, he brought his formation to the intercept point exactly 1 minute early. At 9:34 a.m., lookouts spotted Yamamoto's 2 Betty bombers and 6 escort Zeros approaching right on schedule. Captain Thomas Lanphier and First Lieutenant Rex Barber, leading the killer flight, immediately dropped tanks and climbed to attack. The Japanese, expecting no opposition this deep in their own territory, were caught completely by surprise. Barber closed on the first Betty, opening fire at 300 yards. His concentrated nose armament poured 50 caliber and 20mm rounds into the bomber's right engine and fuselage. The Betty, carrying Yamamoto himself, rolled violently left and crashed into the jungle. The Admiral, struck by 2 bullets, one entering under his left jaw and exiting above his right eye, died before impact. The second Betty, carrying Vice Admiral Matomi Ugaki and staff officers, attempted to escape by diving toward the water. Besby Holmes pursued, damaging it severely before it crash-landed in the ocean. Ugaki survived, but the mission had achieved its objective. 1 P-38 was lost to Zero fighters, but Admiral Yamamoto, the symbol of Japanese naval power, was dead. The psychological impact of Yamamoto's death rippled through Japanese military and civilian morale. That a single American aircraft type possessed the range, speed, and firepower to execute such a surgical strike demonstrated capabilities Japan could not match. Japanese intelligence analysts studying the mission realized they faced a new reality. American fighters could now reach targets anywhere in the South Pacific. No base, no formation, no commander was safe from P-38 attacks. Thomas McGuire, who would become America's second highest scoring ace with 38 victories, exemplified the aggressive spirit P-38 pilots brought to combat. McGuire joined the 475th Fighter Group, an all-Lightning unit, in mid-1943. After a frustrating year watching other pilots score victories, McGuire achieved ace status in just 2 days during August 1943. Downing 5 Japanese aircraft in 2 consecutive missions over Wewak, New Guinea. His tactical brilliance and intimate understanding of the P-38's capabilities made him legendary among 5th Air Force pilots. McGuire's skill at maneuvering the large twin-engine fighter astonished both Americans and Japanese. On October 17, 1943, he dove into a formation of 7 Zeros attacking a damaged P-38. McGuire shot down 3 Zeros in rapid succession, giving the wounded pilot time to escape. The remaining 4 Zeros concentrated on McGuire, setting his left engine ablaze and severing control cables. Attempting to bail out, McGuire's parachute harness snagged on the cockpit. He broke free at 5,000 feet only to discover his ripcord had been severed by gunfire. Finding a dangling wire, he pulled desperately, and his chute deployed at 1,000 feet. His life raft, riddled with bullet holes, immediately sank, but he survived 40 minutes in shark-infested waters until a PT boat rescued him. The incident demonstrated both P-38 durability and pilot determination. McGuire returned to combat within weeks, continuing his climb toward ace status. By December 1944, he had accumulated 38 confirmed victories, just 2 behind Richard Bong's record of 40. On Christmas Day and December 26th, McGuire shot down 7 Japanese fighters in 2 days, defending bombers against overwhelming odds. His Medal of Honor citation describes how he exposed himself to attacks so that he might rescue a crippled bomber, then, in rapid succession, shot down 1 aircraft, parried the attack of 4 enemy fighters, one of which he shot down, single-handedly engaged 3 more Japanese, destroying 1, and then shot down still another. McGuire's death on January 7, 1945, illustrated the risks P-38 pilots accepted. Leading 4 Lightnings on a fighter sweep over Negros Island, McGuire's flight encountered a lone Kai-43 Oscar, flown by Akira Sugimoto, a veteran Japanese instructor pilot. When Sugimoto attacked McGuire's wingman, McGuire pulled his P-38, still carrying a belly-drop tank, into a tight turn, attempting to get guns on the Oscar. The P-38, its handling compromised by the external tank's weight and drag, stalled at 200 feet. McGuire crashed to his death, forever second in the victory standings, but first in the hearts of those who knew his aggressive brilliance and selfless courage. The P-38's dominance forced Japanese air forces into an impossible strategic position. By late 1943, Japanese pilots were instructed to avoid direct engagement with Lightnings when possible. Intelligence reports circulated warning that P-38s destroyed the morale of the Zero fighter pilot through their terrifying diving speed, accuracy, and ability to appear unexpectedly. Japanese pilots spoke of constant tension, knowing P-38s could strike from any altitude, any angle, with devastating effect. The ruggedness frustrated opponents who watched damaged Lightnings escape on one engine and return to fight again, while their own aircraft fell to pieces from concentrated .50 caliber fire. The 5th Air Force, commanded by General George Kenney, eventually fielded 5 fighter groups entirely equipped with P-38s, the 8th, 18th, 49th, 347th, and 475th. The 475th Fighter Group became legendary, containing among its pilots the top 3 American aces in the Pacific: Richard Bong, 40 kills, Thomas McGuire, 38 kills, and Charles McDonald, 27 kills. By war's end, 38 other 475th pilots had achieved ace status, all flying exclusively P-38s. The group's success ratio demonstrated what concentrated P-38 employment could achieve. Charles Lindbergh's involvement with the P-38 program in 1944 illustrated the aircraft's technical sophistication and operational flexibility. Lindbergh, the famed aviator, served as a civilian technical representative from United Aircraft Corporation in the Pacific Theater. Flying combat missions with the 475th Fighter Group, Lindbergh taught pilots advanced fuel management techniques that dramatically extended the P-38's already impressive range. By flying at high manifold pressure but reduced propeller RPM, Lindbergh demonstrated that P-38s could achieve ranges previously thought impossible without burning out engines. On July 28, 1944, Lindbergh shot down a Japanese Mitsubishi K-51 during a combat mission, proving his techniques worked under fire. The P-38's range capabilities enabled missions that redefined Pacific air operations. In early 1945, Lightning pilots from the 12th Fighter Squadron flew missions lasting over 10.5 hours, covering more than 2,000 miles. In August 1945, P-38s established the longest fighter combat mission of World War II, flying from the Philippines to the Netherlands East Indies and back, a distance exceeding 3,200 miles. These missions demonstrated that the Pacific's vast distances no longer provided sanctuary for Japanese bases or forces. American fighters could reach any target, remain on station for extended periods, and return home safely. The psychological warfare aspect of P-38 operations cannot be overstated. Japanese pilots who survived encounters with Lightnings carried their experiences to training units, warning new pilots about the twin-boom devils that own the high sky. These warnings, combined with mounting losses, created a climate of fear that degraded Japanese pilot effectiveness even before combat began. Veterans spoke of the distinctive engine sound, the twin Allisons creating a unique thrumming that could be heard from miles away. Ground troops learned to recognize that sound as a prelude to devastation, diving for cover when they heard the approaching thunder of P-38s. The concentrated firepower proved especially effective against Japanese aircraft due to their lack of armor protection and self-sealing fuel tanks. Early war Japanese fighter philosophy emphasized extreme maneuverability and rate of climb, achieved through minimal weight. This meant Zero fighters carried no armor plating, no bulletproof glass, and fuel tanks that exploded when struck by incendiary rounds. A 2-second burst from a P-38's nose battery, delivering 80-50 caliber rounds and 13 or 14 20mm shells, would transform a Zero into burning wreckage. Japanese pilots watched their comrades explode in flames from hits that would merely damage American fighters with their armored cockpits and self-sealing tanks. By 1944, Japanese air opposition in many sectors had been decimated. The 5th Air Force's P-38 units claimed destruction of more Japanese aircraft than pilots flying any other American fighter type in the Pacific. The statistics tell a story of overwhelming superiority. Lightning pilots shot down over 1,800 Japanese aircraft while maintaining the lowest loss ratio of any American fighter bomber in the theater. More than 100 P-38 pilots achieved ace status, with 7 of the top 8 American aces in the Pacific flying Lightnings exclusively. The aircraft's versatility extended beyond air-to-air combat. P-38s proved devastatingly effective in ground attack roles, using their sturdy construction and twin-engine survivability to press attacks through intense anti-aircraft fire. The concentrated nose armament that destroyed aircraft in flight proved equally lethal against ground targets. A 2-second burst placed 160 half-inch projectiles into a target area the size of a truck, obliterating vehicles, locomotives, and installations with surgical precision. Later variants could carry 2 1,000-pound bombs under the wings and a 500-pound bomb under the fuselage, matching the bomb load of early war medium bombers while retaining full fighter capability. The P-38's contribution to photo reconnaissance operations deserves recognition. Approximately 1,100 Lightnings, about 1 in 9 produced, were configured as F-4 or F-5 reconnaissance aircraft, with cameras replacing weapons. These unarmed variants conducted the majority of American aerial reconnaissance missions in the Pacific, photographing Japanese installations, troop movements, and defensive positions. The twin-engine safety margin and high-speed capability made reconnaissance Lightnings extraordinarily survivable, completing missions deep in Japanese territory and returning with intelligence that guided American strategy. Japanese attempts to counter the P-38 threat proved largely futile. They developed the Kawasaki Ki-61 Tony, a heavier fighter with better high-altitude performance than the Zero, but it still couldn't match the Lightning's speed or firepower. The Nakajima Ki-84 Frank, introduced in 1944, came closest to matching P-38 capabilities, but appeared too late and in insufficient numbers to alter the strategic situation. By the time Japanese aircraft designers created fighters theoretically capable of challenging the Lightning, American pilots had accumulated thousands of hours of combat experience and developed tactics that negated any Japanese advantages. The escort missions protecting B-24 Liberator and B-25 Mitchell bombers showcased the P-38's endurance and fighting capability. Unlike German fighters in Europe that could force bombers to jettison their loads through sustained attacks, Japanese fighters attempting to reach American bombers had to penetrate P-38 escort screens. Lightning pilots, flying top cover at 25,000 feet or higher, would dive on approaching Japanese fighters, destroying them before they could threaten the bombers. The few Japanese aircraft that survived the initial pass faced P-38s with altitude advantage, superior speed, and pilots who had refined boom and zoom tactics to devastating precision. The Lightning's impact extended beyond direct combat effectiveness. The aircraft represented American industrial and technological superiority in tangible form. Each P-38 required approximately 65,000 individual components, 8 miles of electrical wiring, and 2,000 pounds of aluminum, all manufactured to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Yet, Lockheed's Burbank, California factory produced one Lightning every 90 minutes at peak production, with total wartime production reaching 10,037 aircraft. This industrial capacity, producing complex twin-engine fighters faster than Japan could manufacture simple single-engine interceptors, demonstrated the futility of Japan's war effort. The comparison between American and Japanese pilot training further illustrated the growing disparity. By 1944, American replacement pilots arrived in theater with 400-plus hours of flight time, including extensive gunnery training and tactical instruction using captured Japanese aircraft to understand enemy capabilities. They had practiced against realistic opposition, studied gun camera footage from actual combat, and received comprehensive technical training on their aircraft systems. Japanese pilots, by contrast, entered combat with less than 100 hours total flight time, minimal gunnery training, and almost no understanding of American fighter capabilities or tactics. Japanese veterans recognized this reality with bitter clarity. Post-war interrogations revealed consistent themes: respect for Lightning performance, acknowledgement of superior American training and equipment, and recognition that the war had been mathematically unwinnable from the start. The P-38 served as the visible symbol of American advantages in technology, production, and pilot quality. One captured Japanese pilot, when shown P-38 production, facilities and newsreel footage, reportedly said simply, "We never had a chance. You were building these faster than we could train pilots." The aircraft's reputation in Japanese military circles evolved from initial dismissal to grudging respect to outright fear. Early intelligence assessments classified the P-38 as a heavy fighter, unsuited for dogfighting, prediction that seemed confirmed when inexperienced American pilots attempted to turn fight Zeros in late 1942. But as American pilots learned to exploit the Lightning's true strengths, speed, altitude performance, firepower, and diving ability, Japanese assessments grew increasingly alarmed. By late 1943, intelligence summaries warned pilots to avoid combat with P-38s unless possessing overwhelming numerical superiority and ideal tactical position. The famous Japanese nickname for the P-38, the fork-tailed devil, reflected this evolution from mockery to terror. German pilots had coined the term, but Japanese pilots adopted it enthusiastically. The distinctive silhouette became synonymous with death from above, with high-speed attacks that gave no time for evasion, and with concentrated firepower that turned aircraft into fireballs. Japanese ground troops learned to recognize the P-38's distinctive engine sound, diving for cover when they heard the twin Allisons approaching, knowing that strafing runs would follow. By war's end, the P-38 Lightning had fundamentally reshaped air combat in the Pacific. The aircraft that Japanese pilots had initially laughed at in late 1942 had become the most feared fighter in their experience by 1945. American pilots in Lightnings had destroyed more Japanese aircraft than any other fighter type, produced more aces than any other American aircraft, and executed missions ranging from the assassination of Admiral Yamamoto to the longest fighter missions in aviation history. The Lightning's dominance proved so complete that surviving Japanese pilots, when asked decades after the war about American fighters, invariably mentioned the P-38 first, remembering its speed, its firepower, and its seemingly supernatural ability to appear at decisive moments. Richard Bong and Thomas McGuire, the two highest-scoring American aces, both flew P-38s exclusively. Their combined total of 78 confirmed victories represented not just individual skill, but the superiority of their aircraft when properly employed. Bong survived 200 combat missions to die tragically in a P-80 jet fighter accident on August 6, 1945, the same day the atomic bomb fell on Hiroshima. McGuire died in combat, pushing his P-38 beyond its limits, trying to save a wingman's life. Both exemplified the aggressive spirit and tactical brilliance that made P-38 pilots the most feared opponents Japanese aviators would face. The statistical record speaks to the Lightning's dominance. Over 10,000 P-38s were produced during the war years, with approximately half deployed to the Pacific theater. These aircraft flew hundreds of thousands of combat sorties, destroyed over 1,800 Japanese aircraft in air-to-air combat, countless more on the ground, and thousands of ships, vehicles, and installations in ground attack missions. The loss rate remained remarkably low, testament to the aircraft's rugged construction, twin-engine redundancy, and the skill of pilots who mastered its capabilities. Saburo Sakai's post-war assessment captured the transformation Japanese pilots experienced. The ace who had dominated Allied fighters in 1941 and 1942, shooting down 64 aircraft, found himself helpless against P-38s that chose when and where to fight. His admission that the Lightning destroyed the morale of the Zero fighter pilot represented a complete reversal of the psychological dominance Japan had enjoyed early in the war. Japanese pilots who had begun the conflict, supremely confident in their equipment and training, ended it terrified of twin-boomed American fighters that struck with impunity from altitudes Japanese aircraft could barely reach. The P-38 Lightning proved that properly conceived and employed technology could overcome significant obstacles. The aircraft initially suffered from high-altitude cold weather problems in Europe, compressibility issues in high-speed dives, and complexity that challenged inexperienced pilots. But in the Pacific, where warm weather negated cold-related problems, where altitude advantages mattered more than turn performance, and where long range meant survival over vast ocean expanses, the Lightning found its ideal environment. American pilots and engineers refined tactics and technology until the P-38 became the definitive Pacific fighter, the aircraft that Japanese pilots learned to fear above all others. The legacy of the P-38 Lightning in the Pacific extends beyond statistics and victory claims. The aircraft represented a revolution in fighter design, proving that twin-engine configurations could succeed in air superiority roles, that nose-mounted armament provided superior accuracy, and that properly applied technology could dominate even when facing numerically superior forces. Kelly Johnson's radical design, initially dismissed by many as too unconventional, had vindicated itself through combat performance that exceeded even optimistic predictions. Japanese pilots who survived the war carried memories of the fork-tailed devil for decades. Veterans interviewed in the 1970s and 1980s still spoke with mixture of respect and remembered fear about encounters with P-38s. They described the distinctive silhouette, the concentrated nose firepower, the impossible speed of diving attacks, and the helpless feeling of watching Lightnings climb back to altitude while Zeros struggled to follow. These memories, passed to younger generations, ensured that the P-38's reputation would endure long after the last Lightning flew in combat. The aircraft that Japanese pilots had laughed at in December 1942 had become their worst nightmare by August 1945. The P-38 Lightning dominated Pacific skies through superior technology, pilot skill, and tactical employment that exploited every advantage while negating Japanese strengths. American industrial might produce these complex aircraft faster than Japan could replace pilots lost to Lightning guns. The thunder of twin Allison engines became the sound of American victory, rolling across Pacific skies from New Guinea to the Philippines to Japan itself, announcing that control of the air, and therefore the war, belonged to America. If you enjoyed this deep dive into World War II aviation history, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the aircraft, pilots, and battles that shaped the war in the Pacific. We're constantly researching and producing new content about military aviation history, so make sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss our next upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.